Where do the Suns fall in the NBA hierarchy? We will map all of that out, give you our power rankings, and get you ready for opening night right away here on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, covering the Suns as a credentialed media member the past 5 seasons. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen every single morning. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns if you are not already. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Brendon Kleen 14. We are joined today by Jackson Frank. You can get all of his work all over the basketball internet, basketball news, Dime Up Rocks, Liberty Ballers. We will talk about the Sixers today. And the main topic, Jackson, I want to get right into it because knowing you and I think this was a two-parter last year, so we're going to have to hustle through some of this stuff. Is where do the Suns really rank? Because we can argue about their path last season. We can talk about, what they did in the offseason. We all have done all of that all summer already. But what I'm kind of really starting to try to narrow in on is we know everything in the playoffs can be about matchups. We learned that very, very closely during this postseason run that the Suns just finished. So that's kind of where I want to hit is how do they truly match up with the teams that they're going to have to face? And what does it really look like for them to do what they couldn't last season and get to the final? So before we jump into that too hard, how are you thinking about the Suns going into this season and the NBA at the top in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to spoil the conclusion, but I think I'd have the Suns, right in that top 5 to 6. And I think, I have a kind of an idea of how I prefer some of those teams, but, as I've covered the league more and followed it more closely, you just have to be prepared for the unknown. Doesn't mean I try to bake that into my projections, but you have to know that, I might think that team X is the best, but I shouldn't be surprised that the team that I think is notably worse or didn't have the firepower coming into the year ends up, being the best team. But I have the Suns, near the top of the West, and I think they'd be near the top of the East as well. I think it's cool that the last few years, the gap has really been bridging between the East and the West. And I think, for a few years, it was, the top of the East versus the top of the West was fairly comparable. But now we're getting to that middle class of each conference is pretty equal. And so I would have the Suns kind of anywhere, top 3, probably in either conference. I have to think about it a little more in depth. And we'll get into the matchups part of it for sure. But right near the top, I don't know exactly where I expect them to finish, but, they shouldn't be worse than last year, most likely, if their top guys are, as good as we expect.
It's funny going through, there was so much skepticism. I feel like that was such a big talking point throughout the playoffs. And then we come off of it. Maybe the reality is the Suns just proved themselves. I feel that way. And I guess that might be the easy way to look at what happened. But you talk to, I'll do preview. I'll do other people's shows. We did a big network preview show where we talked about the Suns. I do guest spots. I obviously read what other people write and what they say about this team. And I don't think that skepticism is necessarily there. I think that there's a degree of comfort that this team's going to be pretty damn good again. And so I do think that's why I want to organize it this way, because I do think that the real proving ground for them will be the postseason, as it is for, a lot of the top contenders. What they do in the regular season, we can learn from, but at the end of the day, it's really what happens in May, June, and July that matters. So let's do it that way. So what we're going to do here is go through 2 or 3 of the top contenders in each conference. We'll start with the West. I'll give a quick rundown of each team, and then Jackson and I are basically going to sort through who is the best 5, what is the best unit that team will throw out, understanding matchups and things change, but look at it from that perspective, and then how do the Suns match that? How do they, can they, will they be able to match what that team is best at? And the 5 guys that team wants to have on the floor. And so that's what we'll do. We'll start with the Warriors because they're a team I just haven't talked about a ton. I've spent a lot of time talking about the Lakers, as we all do, Jackson. But So Golden State, 21st on offense last year, 5th on defense, 538 projects them at just a 0.5 chance to make the finals, 36-46 record. I think they're just hedging with the uncertainty around Clay, around even James Wiseman and everything else. Plus 550 to win the West at betonline.ag. That's the second best odds. So I think there's a pretty wide gap between what the Warriors could be at their worst versus their best. And a lot of that's dependent on health and just how their veterans age. My 5 for them, and I don't know if there's another 5. This one was kind of one of the easier. I did put Clay in here just assuming that if they're at their peak, he'll be part of that group. It's Curry, Clay, Wiggins, Toscano Anderson, and Draymond Green. Because I think that, it's basically their closing 5 from last year plus Clay. What do you think?
Yeah, they have a couple different ways you can go. If Otto Porter's healthy and he's looked good in preseason, I know it's preseason, but again, health is a huge contingency with him, or caveat, excuse me. I think he could, maybe be a better fit than Wiggins, because they probably won't need as much scoring punch like they needed last year with Wiggins. If Clay is, a good player. I know Clay's not some big creator, but high volume shooter, 20-point scorer many years. So I could see that. I could see Jordan Poole in year 3. I know he's gotten a ton of buzz. He was awesome in the after he came back from the G League bubble last season. You're a little small if you're going with, with a Clay. I know Clay is big, but you're still a little lacking. You're still a little small there, but I could see that. I think I would probably anticipate Poole just being a better player by the end of the year than Wiggins. I could see, so I'll go with him instead of Wiggins. I as much as I want to put Otto in there, I just don't trust the health. You just don't have a track record of that. Him being a long, big time player, or not big time player, just a guy who can count on, I should say. So I'll go with Poole instead of Wiggins. But I love what Toscano Anderson did last year. Had such good chemistry with Steph, similar in a lot of ways to Dre, whether it was the dribble handoffs, the cutting, the short roll stuff. Is a bit of a timid shooter despite shooting 40%. Teams will lay off of him, but can knock down the open shot. Good short roll passer, as I said. So I really am encouraged by the Warriors this year. Just a lot, not just because of what the roster they have, but the news coming out from people who cover the team. What Steve Kerr says he's going to go with a really veteran-heavy rotation this year, which is good because as much as you want to get guys like Moses Moody, James Wiseman, and Jonathan Kuminga run, they're not conducive to maximizing Steph, Dre, Clay. Anthony Slater wrote an article about a month ago about them running a lot of Dre at the 5. They were awesome down the stretch with Draymond at the 5. No disrespect to Wiseman, but his absence was a big reason they closed the year, I think, 15-5, had a good offense, great defense. And then, they have Kevon Looney too. And so if 2 of your top 7 or 8 guys are centers, it's just not really an indictment on Wiseman. It's more just it's hard to find ways to play 3 guys there. And so I would probably go with Poole over Wiggins. I know you're a little small, but I like the scoring punch you get there. Maybe just as a little insurance if Clay is more of a stationary guy, maybe isn't as spry as an off-ball mover as we saw pre both injuries, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely the other 2. You just have a lot of really good defense between them. And, Poole has his defensive deficiencies, but he can score the heck out of the ball and really fits what the Warriors like to run offensively too.
To me, that the point you made about not just the fact that they are going to play more veterans, that helps just in terms of I talked about the gap between how they could be, at their best versus injuries and other things at their worst. I think that playing veterans just kind of narrows that gap a little bit. You have less variability in terms of what you can be, but it also is going to help them in terms of just coming into the year knowing exactly how they want to play, who's going to play, and what they want to be on the floor, which was a big problem for them, not just last season, but the year before with D'Angelo Russell, and they're trying to just change, and it never quite made sense. And I think they settled into an identity that didn't necessarily cut the young guys out of the rotation, but at the very least put only the players that do fit into the rotation. And I think that's how we'll see them operate. Like Poole, Toscano Anderson, those guys are not, 35, but they fit and they know what their role is. And they obviously make sense within what the Warriors want to do. So I think that will just help them just win more regular season games than they have. They'll probably look a lot more like that end of season team than the beginning of the season team, or, the group at the beginning of the prior year when Steph was healthy, I think they lost, 4 or 5 games to open the year. Everybody talked about that a lot. D'Angelo's not here, but it can get that bad again if they get wonky. So I think they just will avoid those hiccups and be more consistent.
Yeah.
My question on this.
I was just going to say,
go for it.
I would say I think their core play, most of their core players fit what they want to do better, especially in offense. Like Oubre just did not fit on that team. I mean,
good. I forgot about him. I think I
you're
put
well
him out of
versed
my
on
memory.
him.
Yeah.
He can do some things, but he's more of a guy you want to maybe, a team that's winning 30, 31 games. You need a little more offense. He's not really an intuitive, guy in terms of that. Wiggins, they needed a scoring punch last year, but Otto's a great off-ball player. Poole's a good off-ball player. Even Damian Lee, who I think is going to be in the rotation, at least based on some reports, is a good cutter and a decent shooter. So we can mention Toscano. Dre is obviously, Dre offense. He has his issues offensively, but he knows what the Warriors are trying to do. The offense is built around Steph. So I just like that more. I apologize for cutting you off, but I just kind of want to add that.
No.
Good point. They
Kelly
have
Oubre is always welcome. I don't know. I haven't had you on in a while. I'm giving away this bobblehead for people who subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just one more way to rid my memory of him, I guess. I like him. I'm exaggerating, but he just doesn't fit on a team that wants to play that way. I think in Charlotte, I'm kind of excited, but you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, he just was an example of a player that they were trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and it was obvious from the jump, and they just won't have as much of that this year. So my question with them, real quick before we end, I think we'll actually jump to the other two West teams with the Eastern teams, because I wanted to talk about the Warriors a lot. I knew we would go deep on them. Is how do you think Ayton looks against not only a small team like this, because we've seen how he looks against small teams, but one that moves the ball this well and has the chemistry, cohesion, and really makes the defense rotate and be smart at the very top of their game when their offense is humming. I mean, that's a version of their offense that probably has a healthy Clay, has a healthy Curry, and some shooting around them that really is going to challenge an elite defense. But I do think that version is possible that the Suns might have to see. And they struggled with the Warriors last year, even when the Warriors were not at their best, just trying to contain Curry. They don't have a perfect defender for him. So how do you think Ayton and this Suns defense really can handle a very small group that plays so together on offense?
Yeah, well, I think it's, the team that was kind of the standard for that last year in the playoffs was the Clippers, right? When they went small without Zubats. And you saw against Utah, obviously Gobert had his struggles, but the bigger thing was that Utah just had no perimeter defenders. So I think with Phoenix against like Golden State, Ayton's going to have to, be very good, but it's also going to come down to Mikal. It's going to come down to Jay. What sort of point of attack defense do we see from Chris Paul, who, was good at times last year, but struggled down the stretch defensively in the finals. So, Ayton is important, but it's going to rely on those guys a little more to make sure that he's not constantly in rotation and having to, go side to side and run to the short corner and, rotate back when Wiggins cuts or, Dre's in the short roll. Can Mikal and Jay? I mean, Jay's more of a help guy, I think, in terms of those really aggressive digs and stunts from the Wigs. Mikal's more of the point of attack guy, and I think what helps is I think it's not a terrible matchup for Mikal. You see him mostly struggle against those bigger scoring wings, the Kawhis, the Jimmy Butlers, even the Paul Georges to an extent. Steph, I think, is arguably the best scorer in the NBA, but I think it's not as tough of a matchup. They're not tough, but it's a little better for his talents, right? He's a great ball screen defender. He can really make things tough. So I think it'll come down to them more than Ayton. But given the growth you saw from Ayton throughout the year, I'm not going to say that like right now I would worry a little bit. But if we're talking about a playoff matchup, first or second round, if that's 6-7 months away, I'm not going to say that oh, Ayton can't get there. I think right now it would require a decent amount of growth in terms of you saw he was great in pick and roll coverage and when things were ahead of him. But when he had to cover one thing and then back to another, that's still something that he's really trying to improve, right? So I'm not saying he can't get there, but it's definitely an area of emphasis this season. I think that's the biggest thing I'll be looking for from him beyond some self-creation growth. But defensively, it's kind of how does he toggle all these different things that the guys like Capella, Gobert, and Embiid are really, really good at, some of the premier defensive centers. And Gobert, had his issues again, but he's very good at balancing a lot of different things at times. And I think that's the next step for Ayton defensively. They can get there, but he's not there yet.
Yeah, it's that steadiness. And it's funny that you mentioned Gobert because I think most people, because of how much the NBA internet likes to clown Rudy, I don't think that there's a perception that he can do that against teams that, move the ball and have shooting and things like that. He 100% can. I mean, there are specific things that he's going to struggle with, but that's not one of them. I mean, he's gotten a lot better in that space of, kind of knowing what he needs to worry about, right? And so Ayton, to me, that's an area where he can really grow, is just that control over every possession as a defender. I'm really interested in this matchup. I think it's going to be one of the ones I want to, make note of the most because we saw, 4 teams. We know specifically how the Suns match up with them because they played them in the playoffs last year. We don't really see them take on this version of the Warriors that was really rolling at the end of the season. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's pivot to a couple other West teams and then the rest of the East here in the next segment. First, though, a quick word from Prize Picks. NBA fanatics, have you heard about Prize Picks, which is the new daily fantasy contest made easy? We love it here at the Locked On Network, and we know you will too, because Prize Picks has the best NBA daily fantasy prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other daily fantasy prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players who are only recording a handful of minutes each game, which means you get your pick from anybody. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from yardage to touchdowns, interceptions thrown, that's on the football side, to points, assists, and rebounds, of course, on the basketball side. So covers across all sports and makes things simple. You get your pick at everything. It's just starting over from scratch the good old way every single week. All of our users that deposit using the promo code NBA will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. That's doubling your money up to $100. Picking 2 to 5 players, an over-under on their projections, and you can win 10 times on any entry of your money. It's just you versus the projected number. So you're not competing against a pool. You're not competing against an opponent. You're picking players versus their over-unders and competing against that spread. The award-winning app is available on the App Store and Google Play Store. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and Prize Picks, of course, is safe and offers fast withdrawals. So again, promo code NBA at prizepicks.com to get a 100% instant match on your first deposit up to $100. That's double your money up to $100. Go to the App Store, download Prize Picks today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Today's show also brought to you by DirecTV Stream. Today I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. DirecTV Stream brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, which means you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So stop waiting and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required, and content varies by package. Keeping our contender preview rolling with Jackson Frank, you can read him at Dime Up Rocks. You can read him at The Basketball News. You can read him at Liberty Ballers. We will get to the Sixers here in just one second. Jackson, Lakers is who we're going to hit next. 23rd on offense last year, second on defense. 538 gives them a 4% chance to make the finals. 538 is very low on the Lakers. 42-40 is the projected record there, and they are +1 still, the favorites to win the West at betonline.ag. With all that said, I really struggled to come up with the top 5. This was honestly one of the reasons I wanted to do the exercise this way, is partially just to sort out what the hell the Lakers' best 5 looks like. I don't think they know. I don't know if any of their fans can even pretend to be sure right now. What I had is Russ, LeBron, AD, Horton Tucker, and Nunn. But that's not a lot of shooting. I don't know how they're going to have a lot of shooting with the players, with Russ and AD and LeBron all on the floor together at the end of games. I think that's just going to be a problem from them for the jump. Who is closing games for the Lakers to start the year? Who do you think they think is their best 5 unit?
Yeah, so I don't love Nunn and Horton Tucker there. I think in conjunction with Russ defensively, you are putting a ton on AD and LeBron, which at their peak they are entirely capable of. I mean, they were all NBA caliber defenders, for stretches to start last year, and obviously when they won the title as well, particularly AD, of course. I like Russ and Malik Monk in the backcourt. I can't decide between Bazemore and Ariza at the 3. I think I go Ariza. He has a little more size, between 6'8", Bazemore about 6'4", and then LeBron and AD. Monk, I really like what he did last year. Shot 40% from 3. Was billed as a big time shooter and out of college, and has made strides in a lot of other ways, whether it's becoming a better creator, attacking the rim more. Didn't finish well last year, but has historically been a pretty decent finisher in his career. So I like that. He's a good team defender. He's not great navigating his career as a point of attack, but if you have Ariza or Bazemore out there, you can kind of rely on one of them, even LeBron, and then you're going to be able to deter a lot of stuff with AD. Just given how much ground he can cover. And obviously, he's got the shooting there. He's versatile. You can run some stuff where he's a pick and pop guy for whether it's Russ, LeBron, AD, let them get downhill. Can be a spot up guy as well, attack some closeouts. Bazemore, I like him defensively. He can be someone who A little overconfident in his creation skills offensively. Can kind of turn on the tunnel vision at times as well. We're going to talk about Warriors. He didn't really fit them offensively last year. Bazemore was a guy, despite being useful defensively. He's up and down as a shooter too. Last year, I think 40% from three, but for his career, maybe 35%, I want to say. So if you get a down year from Bazemore, maybe it's tough. And then same with Ariza. So I side with Ariza, just a little more size. I think he, as poor as he is offensively, he was good last year with Miami defensively. Didn't mean a ton because Miami had a lot of good defense and needed more offense. But the way the Lakers have built this team, trying to skew closer to a better balance after last year, and I think obviously the 23rd offensive ranking was partly because I don't think Vogel had a great scheme, but also because AD and LeBron missed a combined 63 regular season games. I may have been maybe only 60. Maybe I'm counting some of the playoff games as well. But obviously try to add a little more juice with Wayne Ellington. You mentioned Kendrick Nunn, who, despite all his flaws as a passer and defender, who I don't really think is a huge rotation guy for a caliber team, can just run some pick and rolls and score for himself. So I could see Taylor getting there. Obviously, it's going to be tough now because he's going to be out for some sort of period with, I think he has a torn ligament in his thumb, if I believe, which is really unfortunate. I know they are pretty encouraged by him, but I could see him getting there. But I just wonder, right now his best skill is that creation. It made sense last year that they needed some of that. Because given the way the roster is directed, but now do they need that? If the Lakers big three is healthy, do you need much of that? But I can definitely see a place where he is too good to leave off the floor. But right now, I don't quite see it. So I would go with Monk and in one of those older wings, and I side with the guy who's a little more size than Ariza, but also a guy who's injured. So
yeah, I mean, I went a version of this that I had down on paper before was with Bazemore. I really like him. I just find it so hard to count on older players to I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it's the Lakers and it's because on LeBron teams we've just seen so many of these veterans come in and then they don't quite fit how he wants to play, or their role is unusual for them playing on a team with him. It does feel like it can be a toss up for who stylistically is going to settle into that role with a LeBron team versus who won't. I think Bazemore seems like a logical candidate to be able to do that. I feel pretty comfortable with him. He's not quite as big as Ariza either. I probably discount Ariza because of the Sun situation when I kind of wrote him off and figured he was done. I know that's probably not fair, but I do think his effort and commitment level can wax and wane. I think in this situation, he should be fully engaged. His role will be fairly easy, knock down open threes, compete on defense. He has the size to help them.
And at the end of the day, I just would point out, he's kind of been a part-time player the last few years, whether it's only being productive for half a season or last year, I don't think he even played half the year. So I mean, there could be a thing where he comes back and they're relying on him too much. And by June, he doesn't have the juice. I think for the Lakers,
it's either going to be fresher or less. You don't know how it's going to impact him, right?
Yeah. I think for me with the Lakers, some people are comparing him to I think maybe one of the 18 Cavs. Maybe I think it's if it doesn't work, it'd be more like the 2014 Heat, where they just a lot of those role players in the Heat. I mean, even Wade was struggling somewhat. They just weren't good enough, and LeBron was obviously in his prime. I think that, and LeBron isn't in his prime right now. He's still incredible. I'm not saying otherwise, but that's where I could see some of that. Some of these older guys are saying just don't have it by the end of the year. I think this team's going to be good, but maybe they relied on a little too much to get a good playoff seed this year, and by May or June they're just a little bit out of gas. So that's what I can see for sure. I get the hesitancy to maybe rely on them too much early, and that's why it's a bummer. A guy like Horton Tucker being out who could both use the minutes to grow and also be a guy who's you don't worry about burning out by May or June because he's not even 21 yet.
At the end of the day, I mean, to me, with this roster and how the Suns match up with it, I'm only really going to be incredibly worried about them if an overpowering version physically and from a functional strength standpoint of LeBron returns, which I don't think. I mean, it easily could happen. I probably would say it will happen. It's just a matter of how powerful he can continue to be and how healthy he can remain as he winds down his career over the next 3, 4, 5 seasons. And if a version of Anthony Davis that we saw in that last regular season game against the Suns or in the game 3 of the first round where he was dominant, if that version of Anthony Davis is there, I kind of think it trumps a lot of the other question marks that the Suns might be able to exploit with the rest of the roster. Russ, to me, I'm just going to have to see what I don't really have a lot of thoughts until we see what he even looks like. I mean, we've talked about Russ ad nauseum, no matter where he's been. We've seen a fairly consistent version of him no matter what situation he's been in. And I basically, maybe to my own detriment as trying to analyze this stuff, when he was not able to make it work with so much catered toward him in that Houston situation in the bubble. And I know he had injury and I think he had COVID concerns in the bubble. And so that's not super fair to him. But when it didn't work with no center, a guy like Harden, who I think stylistically does really benefit Russ to be able to freelance like he would like to, it didn't work there. And I just don't think this Lakers situation is better than that. So I don't know why it would work here better, So that's kind of where I am. But
I think for me, I would point out like, one, I think it's obviously, as you mentioned, it's key that he had an injury and COVID. But even beyond, like, the process wasn't great. And like I wrote about it, I remember last year. But at the same time, it worked because the Lakers had Anthony Davis. AD was built to shut down Russ on those short rolls. Like they double triple team Harden, got the ball to his hands, and then we're like,
it was a bad matchup.
Like you just sag off and you'll deter everything at the rim. But I do think in some respects it is fair because they won't have the same level of spacing, right? Like they won't have. I mean, maybe teams will double LeBron like as a ball handler. Like sometimes they tend to go under, but like if that's a thing, yeah. And I think like what Russ does really well is he gets big men paid, right? Or he makes things easier. Like even Adams' best year, Daniel Gafford. It's not a coincidence. Daniel Gafford was really good after the trade. Russ was a good fit for him. So I get the hesitancy for sure. You said kind of consistent Russ. The consistency is inconsistency, right? Like you look at his last two stops. Houston, it took a while for them to figure that out, and then maybe past January, February in the regular season, they were awesome before the shutdown. And then last year, he was dealing with an injured quad. Maybe was not very good, honestly, for the first 20 to 30 games. Maybe I'm overestimating, but there was a stretch early in the year where he was pretty detrimental, and then he turned it on and helped lead the Wizards to the playoffs. But I don't know exactly what to make of it either. But I think. If honestly, like it sounds cliche, but if anywhere it's going to work, it's going to be here, right? Like, I mean, a guy with he's going to kind of become a better cutter, become a little more discerning with his decision making as a downhill attacker with, alongside LeBron. He's going to have that release valve if they go to AD at the 5, as a play finisher. So, like, if it doesn't work here, and Russ is getting farther and farther removed from his prime when he won MVP, half a decade ago, it's probably not going to work because LeBron, you can say all you want about his GM skills or struggles. He tends to get guys to buy into their role a lot. And I think this is where it's going to work because you can see Russ being awesome as a weak side cutter and attacking in space, but it's a matter of Russ doing that. He's a guy who kind of likes to play on his terms, and for his credit, it's worked a lot. He's a Hall of Famer, one of the best players ever. So, or one of the best within reason across the entire landscape.
Relatively speaking, of the thousands of people who have come through the NBA, he is one of the best. I kind of personally, I'm at the point where I would like to see some NBA YouTube channel make one of those like marathon 24-hour videos of people with the same sound bites about Russell Westbrook over the past decade, and we can just and I don't even mean that as an insult to you, but it's just like that's why I started with I want to watch him on the Lakers pretty much before I make any judgments. I mean, I wrote something about him too, and I just basically made when he first got traded, and I made the same point that you did, which is if it's going to work anywhere, it'll work here. But I also think we've said that before, right? So I don't know. Yeah. So I'm not terribly afraid of the Lakers unless we just get all-time seasons from AD. Another. I mean,
he's the X factor. He just is. I mean, he
is. Okay, let's go to the Jazz because we are in true to ourselves form. Diving very deep on these teams. So we'll do Jazz and the East after the break and the rankings. The last segment's allowed to be long, but let's move there really quickly here. First, a quick word from Built Bar, my favorite protein bar and the best protein bar on the planet. I know that makes me sound biased, but it really is true. Covered in 100% chocolate, soft and easy to chew. You know what you're getting in every single bar. That's what I love. I can try a new pack. I can try a new flavor, and I don't have to really worry that I might not like it because there is that consistency. They're low in calories, low in sugar, packed with protein. I like to get somewhere around the neighborhood of 20 grams of protein if I'm going to eat a bar. That's the same in a scoop of protein if you're into that type of thing. And Built Bar gets the job done in addition to being delicious. They have the regular favorites, like my favorite, double chocolate. They have mint brownie, raspberry, so something for everybody. They also have rotating assortments of seasonal favorites like cookie dough chunk, which is the special right now. So go to built.com, order your pack today, whether that's your first time or you're coming back for more. You can use the promo code the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your purchase at built.com. All right, let's speed through some of these. I don't like talking about the Jazz that much personally, so this should be easy. Third on offense last year, first on defense. I'm actually exaggerating. I really wanted to see that series last season. I was kind of disappointed just selfishly that Utah blew that second round series because I was really looking forward to just seeing what Suns Jazz would look like. I thought it was a more fascinating matchup, but 18% chance to make the finals by the 538 predictions, plus 600 at BetOnline to win the West. Pretty easy for me, this 5, so that's why I think we can probably move through it pretty quickly. Conley, Mitchell, O'Neal, Bogdanovich, and Gobert. I personally don't. I've heard some of the analysis. I know it's the dog days of summer, and we have to talk about the NBA. And I have no criticism of people who do this full time, but when you're telling me that Eric Paschall is somebody that's going to make a difference, I'm going to skip the podcast episode. He's not going to do that. I really just have a hard time seeing that that's going to be the difference between the Jazz getting over the hump and falling short again.
I don't think they've
Rudy Gay,
Eric Paschall, to be honest. No disrespect.
I mean, look, they're like that. Just I think it's like the NBA brain we all have of like, who do they acquire and how can I turn that into an argument about why they might be different this season? And it's not always the case. I just think at the end of the day, like Mitchell probably has to get better on defense. I don't think there's really going to be much change to what Gobert is going to do for them. I really just think a lot of it's Donovan. And the problem in that Clippers series, more so to me than like the simplified narrative of the Gobert versus not Gobert, and did they have another 5 that they could have used? Like the team is the team. They didn't have any wing defense. Everybody was Reggie Jackson, Paul George were just strolling into the paint like the court was a practice court. And that's going to be an issue no matter who is playing center. So again, to me, I just see the Suns and I feel like the Suns have the talent to get into the paint, to punish them in pick and roll or off of cuts or in transition and these things where the defense for the Jazz last year just couldn't stay in front of anybody. So unless, it really just comes back to Mitchell. I don't see another player, maybe like Mie Oni, who I kind of like. I don't think he's elite, but he could be a factor. I just don't think that they really address that.
I think, honestly, like Mike Conley's health is a huge thing here. Like, I mean, obviously the Jazz could have won that series last year, but like Conley didn't play until game 6 and he wasn't good. He was limited. Like, I'm not saying he's a bigger, of course, like Kawhi missed the final, I think 2 games, at least part of the series, but Conley was really important to them. He was their second best point of attack defender. I think he actually kind of matches up okay defensively against the Suns because where he struggles is against those huge wings. Like I think Paul and Booker are
defend CP pretty well. Yeah,
but Conley is pretty good against like-sized guys. He's really good navigating screens. He and Gobert were great last year defending pick and rolls, but he just wasn't healthy, and he hasn't been healthy. I think in some capacity for 3 of the last 4 years. Whether it was the heel thing in Memphis, and then last year he dealt with some injuries before he was good in the bubble, and then he had the hamstring thing for basically the second half of the last season. So when I said last, I meant the 2 years in the bubble. But anyhow, like I think he's pretty important. I just don't know how much you can rely on him to be at full strength for an entire year because he's a smaller guard who has carried a pretty big workload, and he's 34, going to be 35 soon. And when your best wing defender is Royce Finley, who is good, but he's kind of small, right? And he's not. He can do a lot of good things, but like you saw limitations there. The only thing I struggle with, I wondered like would Ingles make maybe more sense? Or maybe I'm just too high on Ingles and too low on Boyan. But like I think you could make a case if you want to throw Ingles at the 4 there. Such a good, especially if Conley's more limited. Like I kind of trust Ingles a little more in those pick and rolls. I think Boyan.
I've been advocating for an Ingles trade just to turn him into a younger piece. He is so integral to what they do, and he's played there forever. I don't know if that's likely, but that seems like something where any team would be better with Ingles on it. It might just be time to try a more athletic option there, but I don't know. That's probably like Jazz fans would just think I'm crazy.
Because I think Ingles is still solid defensively, but I really do think as he's gotten older, his movement skills decline. He's like just not as good on the ball anymore. Like he's still good in help and pretty smart and all those things. That's great hands.
He's big.
He's got some size. I think he's better than Boyan on that end, and I think like. The Jazz offense isn't like last year. The issue wasn't really the offense. Like I don't have their offensive rating from that series, but like you've got firepower. If like Mitchell has proven back-to-back years now to be just a flamethrower in the playoffs. Conley's a good secondary guy. Gobert, if you can get into the paint, like he's a great finisher. I think maybe you go with Ingles there, but I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a strong take on that. It's just those are the only 6 guys I really considered. Like maybe Rudy Gay. Like he was pretty good last year. in San Antonio. I think if you mentioned like Eric Pascal, if you're going to talk about any like forward that came from a different team last year,
Rudy Gay.
Difference maker is Rudy. It's not Eric Pascal, who wasn't even in rotation for the Warriors, who were fighting for a playoff spot. So,
he's on the team because he's close with Donovan. Like, he's not. Rudy, I think, makes things interesting, but he's also not going to, like, people are talking about him playing the 5. I'm like, if you're taking Rudy Gobert off the floor to put Rudy Gay in at the 5 in a playoff series, then that's not going to make the difference that you're expecting. That's like, I think
he's just maybe the other option at that second forward spot, among
yeah, he's going to play next to Rudy more than he would play instead of him. Yeah.
And a little more mobility, and I mean he was good last year. Like, I was surprised, but I think that's the only other thing I could see. But I don't feel. I mean, it's really just that 4 spot, but everything else is pretty set in stone. And the Jazz are, I think the Jazz could be really good. I mentioned maybe before we got on right at the start of the show, like, I don't think they wouldn't be my pick to come out of the West, but I wouldn't be surprised, like, in the sense where, like, and this isn't to discredit the Suns, but maybe things align for the Jazz in the sense that, like, they're healthy and maybe and I'm not discrediting the Suns, but, like, they're healthy and they take advantage because they're a good team, and then all of a sudden the Jazz are in the finals. Again, that's not to say the Suns didn't deserve it, but every team gets a little benefit of circumstance, and you could say the Jazz had that when Kawhi went out, but they have their own issues. So the Jazz are pretty straightforward. They're really good, but they have some clear issues if everyone's at full strength, I think.
So I don't know if I said it. 3rd on offense, 1st on defense last year, 18% chance to make the finals, plus 600 to win the West at BetOnline. So, yeah, they're going to be right there. I think they're going to be a contender to win to have the top seed in the West, maybe the top overall seed. They've proven that. They're going to be a regular season juggernaut. I'm excited I like watching Donovan Mitchell. Maybe Suns fans just have a thing with him because the internet decided that him and Booker were rivals, even though that's never really been borne out. But I love watching Donovan, and he's one of my favorite players in the league. So I would be excited to see a breakout year, a really bona fide superstar leap from him. I think he has the goods to be a better defender. I think he was a prospect that we thought could be that. He just hasn't really been a guy that, I mean, he's undersized he's definitely not the size of a 2, traditionally, but I think he has the athleticism and the explosiveness to be a little bit better there, especially on ball. So we'll see. But I'll let you actually just pick a team from the East, because the snafu you quickly get into talking about contenders in the East is, one, we already saw play out because the Bucks didn't change their team that much, and they just beat the Suns in 6 to win the championship. And the other 2 teams are nightmares. So who do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about the Bucks. I've talked enough about the Sixers, and the Nets are such an unknown. Let's talk about the Bucks. I think you mentioned they're still fairly similar, but they made a couple of tweaks, and they'll get a guy back, and Dante DiVincenzo. I'm happy to go on the record here. Like, I don't think the Bucks are, when everything is equal, would be my pick to win the title, but I think they're going to repeat. I think they get the bump. Giannis and Middleton figured a couple of things out in the playoffs, I think, as the year went on offensively. Drew, I think, despite all his decision making flaws at times as a scorer, can't be as bad. It can't be as bad scoring wise in year 2 with the Bucks. They're just my pick. I think the Nets are probably a little more talented, but as you mentioned, there's stuff going on there. And you just don't know. The Lakers, I think they're probably a little more talented, but I worry about the injuries and the age and all that sorts of things. So they're good. They're really good. I think Dante's going to help. I like the Grayson Allen pickup. He's an improvement on kind of what they had last year. They didn't have much guard depth. They were playing Jeff Teague in the finals. So I think they're really, really good. Even if I don't necessarily think when everything's flat, maybe they're the best team, but they're right up there. They're deserving of everything they've received in the title, obviously. So.
I really liked the Grayson Allen pickup. I think he's grown into a pretty useful rotation player. I mean, I get against the Nets, against the Suns, against, pick your team. There is a level of, I kind of want to see that first. Just he is a little bit undersized. I know he competes on defense, but he's obviously a little bit underrated or under-equipped to handle, elite wing matchups there. He's probably not going to be much of a playmaker, but if he can survive as a 3-and-D guy, they didn't really have a piece like that last year. Their rotation was trimmed so short by the end of things because of the Dante DiVincenzo injury and the fact that they didn't really have anything behind him in the first place. So you just removed kind of your only secondary guard next to Drew. Now they have 2 if Dante can stay healthy and Grayson does look a little bit better. I think Bobby Portis just figured some things out in the finals and in the conference finals where I think he can be within that role a pretty useful player. I mean, his regular season last year was incredible. I think he can duplicate that, and I think he's kind of looked figured out how to be a rebounder, energy player. They can protect him on defense a little bit with Brook and with Giannis in a way that a lot of teams can't. Like, I just think that their institutional knowledge, and at the end of the day too, like, we can go through the changes, but if Giannis is actually busting out some of these confident moves that he's looking like he's trying out in the preseason, and he expands his offensive arsenal even more, at least makes teams respect that he's going to be able to do some different things with, pull-up jumpers and different post moves and things like that. Like, this is a guy who's won 2 MVPs and a finals MVP, and he's only 27, and we could be talking about an even better season. And that's just terrifying. So this team is going to be a juggernaut again. I think you're right. If they repeat it, I don't think anyone would be surprised.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if we get to the point where, it's a little bit of the LeBron style where they take it a little easier. That's what they did last year, right? Like they experimented, They tinkered with the rotation, the schemes on both ends. Giannis was still great, but I don't think he was as good as his 2 MVP level seasons, at least not the second one, which was just one of just an incredible regular season. And it worked.
Yeah.
Giannis was incredible in the postseason. They won. They were so versatile on defense, especially because of all the things they tried in the regular season. Like, I wonder if that's what we kind of start to see with the Bucks and Giannis is, okay, we'll be a team that wins, about 51 to 55 games. We're not going to gun for the 61, 65 win seasons. But we're going to be ready. Like, we've got the goods. And I think with Giannis, like, I don't even care about the 3. Like, if he just has that little mid-range pull-up now, like the one where he drives and has a little spin, like, I think we saw it against the Jazz on one play. I think Steve Jones might have tweeted about it and it got a bunch of traction. Like, that's the move right there, because teams still aren't going to really guard him from 3. Like, he's arguably the best rim threat in the league last. I think he shot like 81% in the restricted area, which is, like a free throw for him, which is ridiculous. So teams aren't really going to guard him. Like, sometimes he'll hit a couple of threes and teams will kind of inch closer to him, but for the most part, they're going to live with that. And so I think if he can get to that little counter, that can be a consistent shot for him. Like, I don't have the numbers on it, but like, it feels like it's more been a 35 to 37% success rate. If you can get to the 43, 48%, somewhere in there on short mid-range, like, now you're really talking. So I think they're really good. Like, I think having Grayson too, because, Pat Connaughton I thought was pretty solid in the finals last year, so I have maybe 1 or 2 games, if I recall, but he's more of a streaky shooter. Like, he's about 35% from 3. Grayson now,
his hot streak is probably the single thing that will give me nightmares the longest. Like, there is no reason he should have been making as many threes as he did. He's never been that type of player, and out of nowhere, he's just raining threes.
But I think
I agree. Like, having another option, right?
Yeah, a little more reliability from deep than Pat, and being beholden to his streakiness is nice. So, and like I said, I think, as discouraged as I was with Drew's decision making scoring wise, he was still great defensively, was still pretty dang good as a playmaker for others. Like, I know his hit to turnover ratio wasn't great, but it matches the eye test. Like, he made some weird passes at times, but he's got a lot of strength and some flexibility that enables him to make those weird passes. So I think we saw Giannis really take a step, figuring things out as a scorer. Chris was obviously great in, through the last 2.5 series, more or less, maybe at least the last 2. So you saw, even saw Bud take a step forward. Like, Bud was a way better coach by the end of those playoffs than he was at the start. And I think that's, it doesn't always happen, but it is interesting how, like, we always talk about players getting better, but like, it happens with coaches too. And I think Bud was a great example of that. Ty Lue's another guy who's gotten better as a coach. I think, if we're talking about the Suns, I think Monty's going to learn a lot from the playoffs last year in the finals, where maybe he didn't always make the best, push the right buttons, which he'd done mostly throughout this first 2 years. So I just think the Bucks are really well equipped to capitalize on last year. And even if I think maybe the fully healthy Nets are a little, a step ahead, and maybe even the Lakers, I just don't know if those are realities. Maybe they're just kind of conceptualized ideas. And I think the Bucks are a lot more closer to kind of their ceiling. Their ceiling is more reality. So I really like what they have this year. And I was low on them last year, and I'm kind of learning from my ways and trying to be to learn. All right, I made mistakes, so
we have learned firsthand here in Phoenix. I don't think we will underestimate the Bucks anytime soon. I do just want to reiterate too, Dante DiVincenzo, who maybe people in Phoenix, whatever, who weren't monitoring Milwaukee much last year. I do think what he grew into last season prior to his injury is legit. I think you can trust him to be a more consistent 3-point shooter now. His volume and efficiency both went up over a pretty big sample size. His assist numbers were higher. I think he felt more comfortable in that offense, attacking closeouts and making plays and just being a chess piece for them. And then, just his hustle stuff. He's a guy who had almost 6 rebounds a game last year out of, being 6'4" and playing with huge guys all around him, was somehow grabbing boards. And I think that guy is a pretty perfect role player for the type of team that they are. So yeah, we've said far too many nice things about the Bucks for a Locked On Suns podcast, so we can move on. So the teams we've talked about here, Jackson, are the Warriors, the Lakers, the Jazz, the Bucks, and then I mentioned the Sixers and Nets. I'll also add the Nuggets, Clippers. We don't have to include the Mavs. I put them on there, but I'm not super confident that that's going to be
unless
a real
Luka
player.
just goes like 07 or 09 LeBron, which I mean might happen, but
not out of the question. But I've
skeptical.
also done that. Like I think I was really on that train last year, and then got burned. And people don't like hearing me talk about Luka, so we can stop on that one. But so those 8 or so teams, and then the Suns. I'll start with the rankings. That way, I can give you a little bit of time to think. I still put the Nets on top.
Me too.
I know that we just gave all this flowers to the Bucks, but even if I'm pretty confident, I just think the talent wins. And the Nets roster is even better than it was last season. They have Harden for a full year. Hopefully they're healthier, and the depth helps them stay healthier.
We're talking about coaches as well. Maybe he figures a couple of things out. I'm not saying that's like the reason I have them on top, but I think when talk about Monty and Bud getting better, that matters too. But yeah, I agree that.
Yeah. So I have Nets, then I have Bucks. I don't know if it's just a homer. Here's where I think I might have the Suns third, but I just feel like that. To me, that doesn't seem like the consensus, and the fact that it's the team I cover makes me feel like I'm being a homer. But that's where I have the Suns is the top of the West and right behind.
Consensus doesn't mean correct, and I would have the Lakers. I would have the Lakers second here, like about 8, but acknowledging that, like I can definitely see that crash and burn, like absolutely a thing where Russ is maybe not the guy you need. AD struggles with injuries again, unfortunately, and like you never want to price injuries into this thing, but AD is a guy who's had enough of this. But at the same time, AD's largely been a great playoff performer, so I would have them second. LeBron still like I know he struggled from that high ankle sprain, but that's not something you can like really recover from in season. Like you want to look at another guy like Christian Wood sprained his ankle, and he had a really good year overall, but he definitely was not the same kind of bouncy, explosive athlete post injury last year. LeBron was the same way. I get the skepticism with LeBron because it's now 2 times in 3 seasons for a guy who's generally been ultra durable, who's had pretty significant injuries, but he was in the MVP conversation before the injury last year. Even I don't think he was people saying he was the favorite. I did not like that manufacturing. Jokic was great all year, but LeBron's still really, really good when healthy. So I would have them second, but I fully acknowledge that it's maybe kind of an idealized version. We're doing the same with the Nets, right? So,
sure. So you have Bucks third after them then, and then the Suns?
Yeah, I think I would go the Suns fourth. The Suns and Jazz. Like I know the Jazz didn't make it anywhere close to as far as the Suns, but like it's about matchups. We saw that sort of thing. I think the Jazz, they were really, really good in the regular season. I know that like doesn't always translate, but they've got good players. I think Quinn Snyder has to be less rigid. We're going to keep talking about coaches like he just didn't really try things differently defensively, and that was part of the issue too. But they've got good players. Gobert, for all his issues, is an awesome regular season player, and if you can kind of dictate your seeding a little bit. Like Mitchell is awesome as well. So it's a toss up for me. They'd be 4 and 5. I just think they're a little bit clear of anyone else in the East. Even though I think maybe a team like the Hawks have a little bit of upward mobility in a way that not quite the same way that a team like just the Mavs, for instance, or the Nuggets necessarily. But the Nuggets are no Jamal. I mean, the Nuggets. People, I see all these people talk about does Jamal Murray change his sweep? But it wasn't just Jamal Murray. It was PJ Dozier. It was Murray as well. It was Will Barton played, I think, half the series. That all has a ripple effect because what that meant is how often they were able to force Michael Porter Jr. to make a key rotation as the low man there or get him on a switch. And he was awful at that. I still think Michael Porter Jr. is going to be a great player, but there's ripple effects to that. But we can't really.
Monte Morris was weirdly awful in that series. Missed
first round,
most of his shots. Yeah.
So I
would have the Nuggets. I actually think Denver is right up there. I mean, I feel pretty less so than other teams. I feel pretty comfortable that they can integrate Jamal back into what they do. I mean,
it's a matter of who he is, right?
Exactly. It's a matter of how healthy can he get, and can he be the guy that he was in the bubble, or are we talking about a different sort of player?
But I don't even think it has to be the bubble. He was really good last year. He was having his best year to date. Up and down defensively.
He's improved as a defender a lot.
Yeah. Good better passer now, good scorer. I think he was shooting 40% from 3. I think if Jamal is who he is, he has such good synergy with Jokic. I mean, Jokic makes things pretty easy for everyone, but he and Jokic have had such a good connection now for half a decade. I think you can pretty easily integrate him, as you said. And Jokic, he's arguably the best player in the NBA. You don't have to necessarily say he's the best, but I mean, the way he dominated last year, I know he started a little bit in the Suns series and didn't like the whatever. I can't remember who he had some uncool play that he got him ejected from Game 4, but yeah. But he's dominant. So I mean, you always got a chance with him. I really do think. And if Murray is that kind of that top 30ish, top 35 guy he was last year, you're in a pretty good spot. And I think you saw some limitations with Aaron Gordon when he had to play up in terms of offensive hierarchy, but he was freaking awesome when he was that third or fourth guy who could just be a cutter and run some stuff as with Jokic on screens and inverted pick and rolls. But yeah, I think the Nuggets of Jamal are right there with the Jazz and the Suns. And I mean, depending on how they look, I might have them above both those teams, but I can't say for certain.
So here's my order: Nets, Bucks, Suns. I'm gonna put the Nuggets there. Jazz, Lakers, Sixers, Warriors.
Lakers are tumbling down. I get this.
I can't do it. I really can't. I mean, and I'm totally happy to be proven wrong, but I just think I don't know. At some point, you have to weigh how many negatives there are versus the expectation that a positive will materialize for them. And it's we know the talent is there, and nobody's denying that, of course. But everything came together for them in the bubble, and I just that doesn't happen all the time, And I think the talent around the league is better than it was in the 2020 playoffs. So. That's all
I think for me, I would just say their two best superstars fit really well together on both ends. They, as many offensively inclined players they brought in to replace defensively inclined players, they were second in defense last year. Despite AD and LeBron playing half the year, Vogel historically has been a great defensive coach. So I think I trust that. Yeah. And so again, I get that maybe some of the injury and maybe the age and Russ not being a great fit potentially could derail this, but I have them second still. I go Nets, Lakers, Bucks, and then it's kind of maybe a slight drop off in terms of ceiling, but in reality, it could be kind of all grouped together among the Suns, the Jazz, and the healthy Nuggets. But but we're talking idealized, right? If we're talking about we're talking about we're idealizing the Nets and Lakers, where I am at least. So I got to be consistent. Idealize the Nuggets, who were really, really good post Aaron Gordon trade last year, and for all the things you can say about Michael Porter Jr., I think he's going to have a really, really good year. I think he's going to learn from that playoff experience. He's going to figure out ways to counter when teams are really physical with him when he works off screens, off the ball. He's probably, you want to think that he can be better defensively off the ball. Offense, on the ball, I think it's probably going to be a struggle just given his movement limitations. But I think he can learn to get better balance that, because he was rotating so aggressively at times, and then he wouldn't rotate. So I think he's going to get better there. So that would be kind of my top 7. And then I don't know with the Sixers. You just don't know. Maybe Ben.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't even include the Clippers either, because I don't really know, and I don't know if Kawhi will play. And at that point, I'm just kind of guessing and putting them. Oh, if Kawhi what are we going to do?
Who was Reggie Jackson? To add to that. The playoffs, Reggie Jackson becoming an incredible on-ball scorer was so key to them getting 2 games away from the finals. I think Reggie's going to have a good year because he's been good in LA his entire time now, since dating back 2 years or so. But I don't know if he can be a guy who averages, I think post Kawhi injury in those 2 games, or maybe the second half of the series, he was, or second half of the playoffs, he was 21, 5, and 4 guy on 58, 59% true shooting. I just can't quite trust him to be that. Kind of give him his size and his age and some knee injuries, but I think he'll be good. But the Clippers, another unknown. So much of the West or the East, the West is unknown in the middle class, even the East, but that's a little less because of injuries, more because there's moving parts and new guys, whether it's the Bulls.
There's some bizarre situations unfolding. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a fun season. That's part of the reason that I've felt so comfortable with, telling listeners that I think the Suns are going to hit their over. I think it's still at 51.5. I just think the Suns, the Jazz, the Nets, these teams, as long as they're healthy, which they have been for the most part, relative enough, they're going to be pretty great in the regular season. And I think next year's playoffs are going to be awesome for this exact reason. So as expected, we did go long, but hopefully this sets your guys' week off right. I'm going to go mentally prepare for the Cardinals Browns game. No coach, half their team has COVID. We'll see what happens. I'm probably going to need the remaining 2 hours here prior to prepare for that. Well, you guys will all know what happened by the time you listen. Maybe it'll be euphoric, but I'll be back tomorrow
today too, right? We got Sky Mercury.
Sky Mercury. Yeah, I'm less bullish there, unfortunately. But yes, that is true. We'll see. We'll see how good of a Arizona Sports Monday we have in store for ourselves. But yeah, that'll wrap us up. I'm going to have a couple more preview shows, guys. And then, of course, on Wednesday night, we get the first Suns game of the year, national TV. I will be there. It'll be awesome. I'm sure you are all wow. I'm sure you are all thrilled. And apparently I'm not, I guess. Okay, cool. That'll wrap us up. Jackson Frank, you can read him all across the internet. Follow him at JackFrank_JJF. Frequent guest here. I'm sure you all consider Jackson an honorary Suns fan, as we've joked before. But that'll wrap us up, guys. Enjoy your Monday.